Wait, what's your superpower, Mysterion?
I can't die.
Oh, yeah, good one. Mysterion can't die, and Iron Maiden is indestructible.
No, Stan, I'm being serious. I really can't die. I die all the time, and you assholes never remember. Do you know what it feels like to be stabbed? To be shot? Decapitated? Torn apart? Burned? Run over? It fucking hurts! Remember this time! Try and fucking remember!
Welcome to the Kill Count, where we tally up Kenny's deaths in all our favorite episodes. I'm Bloomsday Blanice, and today we're looking at South Park, released in 1997. Coming from the twisted comedic minds of Matt Stone and Trey Parker, South Park has solidified its spot as one of the most culturally relevant pieces of media in the last 30 years. And alongside this notoriety has come some of the most iconic gags in television history. Alright, I'm already tired of doing that bit, so now it's just back to my normal voice. But even with South Park's huge influence on popular culture, there has always been one running gag from the show that, for whatever reason, has easily become the most iconic joke from the entire show. That, of course, being Kenny's deaths. Now, if you somehow don't know, Kenny is one of the 4 original main characters, and during the early seasons, he would be killed in some horrific fashion nearly every episode, with Stan and Kyle immediately proclaiming,
Oh my god! They killed Kenny! You bastard!
He would then respawn in the next episode with zero explanation and no acknowledgement from any of the characters. It's an incredibly simple but surprisingly funny gag, and it quickly established that Matt and Trey had no problem with ignoring continuity and logic in their show for the sake of comedy. And when I say that this is the most iconic gag from the show, I really do mean that. It's been referenced in countless other movies and TV shows, so much so that I've heard people reference it without even knowing it's from South Park, which may sound kind of hard to believe, but it's true. Whenever I'm talking to someone who has never seen South Park, they will almost always say something along the lines of, you know, the only thing I know about that show is that they kill Kenny. For whatever reason, this specific joke just seemed to outshine anything else from the show, and the fact that even today it's what the show is most known for really goes to show just how much of an impact it made. Because if you're a fan of the show, you know that they stopped consistently killing Kenny 25 years ago now. You see, after the first 5 seasons of the show, Matt and Trey got tired of coming up with new ways to kill Kenny, and combined with the fact that they wanted Butters to move into being a main character, they decided to just kill him off for good at the end of season 5. And funny enough, one of the first South Park videos I made on this channel was about this episode and how it affected the show, with the entirety of the next season missing Kenny. And then at the end of the season, they brought him back with absolutely no explanation. And from that point on, Kenny died very infrequently, usually once or twice a season at most, with several seasons containing no Kenny deaths at all. And so I thought it would be fun to take a look back at the history of one of the most iconic parts of South Park's legacy and go over every time Kenny has died in the show, movie, and specials, and rank each of them from worst to best. Honestly, it's been a long time since I've done a South Park ranking video, and I've had this idea for like literal years at this point, so I figured that the off season is probably the best time to do it. And what's funny is I actually started working on this video over a year ago now, but then LS Mark had to do what he does best and beat me to a video that I've been procrastinating, so that delayed us a little bit. But I finally decided that now's the time to do it for real. So in terms of my criteria for ranking these kills, it's generally going to come down to my personal enjoyment of each one based on a few factors. Number 1 is the creativity. Generally, if a kill is more creative, it's more enjoyable. Number 2, the context and humor. Did this death have any plot relevance to the episode, and did it make me laugh? And number 3, the violence. How brutal is the death, and how does that play into our other factors? And even with all that being said, there will almost certainly be a few placements in here that don't make any sense even with these factors in mind, and chances are I'll say something along the lines of, oh, I don't know what it is, but for some reason I really like this one. And I apologize in advance for the frustration that may cause you. So through my research, I was able to find a total of 104 deaths that will be included in this video, and I will only be including deaths that come from the TV show, the movie, or the Paramount specials. So that means I won't be including anything from any of the video games, or any shorts, or commercials, or anything like that. And given the subject matter of this video, there is a very high likelihood that it will be demonetized, so if you want to help support me and get yourself a delicious energy/sleep/hydration drink, then go to gamersubs.gg and use code BLOOMS to buy some tubs for yourself. And if you've never tried Gamersubs before, you can even use my code to get a bunch of free samples sent to your house completely free of charge. They even cover the shipping. And then when you inevitably love it and need to buy more, you can use code BLOOMS at checkout. Seriously, go check out Gamersubs. They make amazing products. I've been a fan since way before they even sponsored me. And of course, you'd also be supporting me by doing so, which, I mean, you want to do that, right? I mean, you care about me, don't you? If you didn't support me, I'd just have to assume that you hate me. You don't hate me, do you? Nah, I'm just kidding, but if you do want to give GamerSupps a try, make sure to use code Blooms at checkout. I would greatly appreciate it, and thank you to GamerSupps for sponsoring this video. So just how many times did those bastards decide to kill off Kenny? Let's find out and get to the kills. This is ranking every Kenny death from worst to best. But I did want to give some honorable mentions to Kenny's deaths in the spirit of Christmas. Before South Park was officially created, Matt and Trey made 2 Christmas cards that would be the precursor to South Park, entitled Jesus vs. Frosty and Jesus vs. Santa. In the original Jesus vs. Frosty, they do technically kill Kenny, but Kenny is actually not Kenny in this one. This was so early on that they were referring to the character resembling Cartman as Kenny.
Frosty killed Kenny!
So even though this is technically Kenny dying, it's more like Cartman dying. Then in Jesus vs. Santa, everything is kind of worked out in terms of the character names, and the actual Kenny dies this time. Alright, so in order to better structure this video, I am using a tier list format. The tiers are D, C, B, A, and S, but this is more just to organize the list a bit more easily. Even the worst Kenny deaths are still, like, entertaining, so the actual tier each one is in doesn't really matter that much, but the D tier is mostly going to be off-screen deaths or ones where he just drops dead. Number 104 is in the episode Put It Down, when Kenny dies off-screen and isn't even mentioned. It's essentially just an Easter egg that's mentioned at the very end of the episode during the musical number, and because of that, it's probably the worst one out of all of them. But on an unrelated note, I forgot that during this song, they have a lady translating to sign language, and I don't know why, that's just very funny to me. At the 103rd spot, we have his death from the post-COVID specials. Now, Kenny's death is actually very important to the plot because it kind of kicks off the whole mystery that they're trying to solve, but for the death itself, it's just completely off-screen. But we do get a shot of them seeing his body later on, which was pretty interesting, and Kenny's, like, aged-up character design is definitely my favorite of all of the characters, but the death itself is pretty unremarkable. And also, because of the fact that they do end up fixing the future, this death is actually undone, which I was originally going to say makes it technically not canon, but then I remembered that literally every Kenny death ever is undone, so I guess it makes no difference. At 102 is his death from the Worldwide Recorder concert, where he dies off-screen by crapping himself to death after the boys get everyone to play the brown note.
Everyone here has crapped their pants. Some crap themselves to death.
Just another off-screen death. It is kind of funny because the concept of crapping yourself to death is kind of funny, but aside from that, it really has nothing going for it, and he's actually seen still alive at the end of the episode due to a continuity error. At 101, we have another off-screen death, this time when Kenny is shot by the Chinese mafia while the boys are trying to get Wing back as a client. Now, this is the first example of something we'll see a lot on this list, which is the fact that rather than their typical indifference towards Kenny dying, sometimes they like to randomly decide to have the boys care about Kenny dying for comedic effect, and Kyle being emotional and going ballistic about it makes this scene a lot funnier, but it's not funny enough to carry it out of being lower on the list.
They killed Kenny! You bastards!
Spot 100 comes from Here Comes the Neighborhood, in which Kenny dies off-screen in an unknown manner. The reason this one's a little higher up than some of the other off-screen deaths is because this episode focuses mostly on Token, and when he meets back up with them later in the episode and you just see them dragging Kenny's body along, it's pretty funny to imagine that, of course, Kenny died even when we're not following the main boys. The 99th spot comes from the episode Death in Season 1. This one's definitely a classic, with the boys being chased by Death himself, and of course he kills Kenny just by touching him. It's nothing very special. I mean, at least it's an on-screen death, but he just drops dead after being touched. But the fact that he can just drop dead after being barely touched does go to show that with that talent, he might have a spot on the roster of the OKC Thunder in the future. Alright, so the 98th spot comes from the episode City on the Edge of Forever, and technically he dies twice in this episode, although one of them is in a flashback. The boys are trapped on a bus teetering on the edge of a cliff, and they think they're safe as long as they stay in the bus.
Well, who really cares what that monster is outside? As long as we stay on the bus, it can't hurt us, right? Oh my god! He's killing Kenny! You bastard!
Now, the death isn't technically shown on screen, but obviously it's implied that he's killed by the monster. And this one gets to a slightly higher spot because I always appreciate the goofiness of the early animation. Like, the way the monster just waddles away is very funny to me. 97 comes from the episode Chickenpox, in which the boys all end up in the hospital with chickenpox. And it starts as a very wholesome sitcom ending where they're all laughing along until, of course...
Oh my god! They've killed Kenny! You bastards!
Another one where he just kind of drops dead, so it's nothing too special, but it's alright. Number 96 comes from the episode Clubhouses, in which they have a mosh pit in their new treehouse and Kenny is trampled to death. Again, mostly an off-screen trampling, but what makes this one a little bit better is the fact that it's a rare opportunity for Cartman to say the line, and the fact that Kyle just so happens to be walking by at the same time.
Oh my god! They killed Kenny! You bastards!
Number 95 comes from season 3 when the boys think they got their period, so they're having a meeting to discuss like feminist literature. Don't ask. And Kenny ends up dying after the tampon that is in his ass, I guess, clogged him up, and he just kind of spits up a little bit of blood. Another one where he kind of just drops dead, but at least we get a little bit of blood in this one, so better than nothing. Now, the 94th spot actually comes from season 9, episode 4. Isn't that funny? This is actually his second death of the episode, and we'll talk about the other one later, but in this one, he dies off screen after they remove his feeding tube while he's in a vegetative state. Now, again, I'll talk more about this episode later on, but this is actually one of their better social commentary episodes, and this scene is kind of the way they wrap it all up. And it's only this high up because it allows him to finally command Heaven's army against the forces of hell with the golden PSP. Don't ask. So at 93, we have another early season 1 death, and in this case, Kenny was turned into a duckbill platypus earlier in the episode by the son of Satan. And if you don't know, it was kind of a running gag in the early seasons that Jimbo and Ned just love to shoot random animals, and they would justify it by saying it's coming right for us right before they shoot it. So of course, as soon as they see a duckbill platypus, they do exactly that. Now this one ends up being a bit underwhelming, but I do think it's funny that his head just fell off for some reason, like they don't explain that. And also the fact that Kenny is a duckbill platypus itself is kind of funny. 92 comes from the episode The Wacky Molestation Adventure, in which Kenny is sacrificed to the statue of John Elway during a Lord of the Flies parody. Don't ask. And despite being an off-screen death, this one is still pretty brutal since they show his body with like the decay and missing eyes. It's pretty sick. And this is also the first example of something we'll see a lot more on this list, and that's that there seems to be some kind of force that compels nearby people to react to Kenny's death in a similar fashion, and I thought this one was pretty funny.
They killed him.
The bastards.
91 comes from Starvin' Marvin in Space, in which Kenny is encased in carbonite by the CIA and given to Sally Struthers, who is basically Jabba the Hutt. Again, an off-screen death, but it is kind of a funny reference, and I can appreciate it for that. Number 90 is a death that many of you may not have ever seen because this comes from one of the band episodes. It's Super Best Friends back in season 5. In this episode, the boys join the cult of David Blaine, and it's kind of like a running gag throughout the episode that without their hair and hats, they all look exactly the same, and you can't tell the difference between any of them.
I'm not Kyle. I'm Butters. I thought you were Kyle. No, I'm Stan. You're Stan? Where's Kenny? Who are you? I'm Kyle.
Guess who I am, you guys?
So when the cult ends up all drowning themselves in the reflecting pond in DC, it is funny how Stan finds him and immediately recognizes him.
Oh my god! They killed Kenny!
And while the death itself isn't that special, what I really love about this is the fact that this whole time Stan has been looking for Kyle, and as soon as he says the line, then Kyle says his line, and it becomes like a game of Marco Polo in the pool. It's pretty funny.
You bastard!
Kyle?
Oh my god, they killed Kenny!
You bastards!
Oh my god, they killed Kenny!
Rounding out the D tier at the 89th spot comes from the episode Pee, in which Kenny drowns in a massive ocean of pee at the water park. This episode is just super gross, and this is definitely one of the grossest ways that Kenny has died. And while it is an off-screen death, what I do enjoy about this one is the fact that you can see his hair and the rest of his body. Like, he's not completely covered how he usually is. But now let's go ahead and move on to the C tier. Number 88 comes from one of the first episodes of the entire show, the episode Volcano. And this one's weird because it seems like he dies early in the episode from the giant, like, molten boulder that flies out of the volcano. But then later on in the episode, he's just back, like he just appears again, and there's no explanation for that. But as soon as he reappears, this is when he definitively dies, as he is shot by Ned when he drops his gun. And on the wiki, this is technically listed as 2 deaths in the same episode, but really there's no way to prove that he actually died the first time, so I'm just gonna count the latter death because that makes more sense to me. Number 87 comes from Ike's Wee Wee, in which the boys are at Ike's funeral after they faked his death to save him from a circumcision. Don't ask. Kyle is busy ranting about the fact that Ike isn't his real brother, and while that's happening, Kenny falls into an open grave and the headstone crushes him. Nothing super interesting about this one, it's just funny because of Kyle's uncaring attitude.
Oh my god! They've killed Kenny!
You bastards!
86 comes from the Red Badge of Gayness, in which Cartman is leading the Confederate army after Stan and Kyle bet him that the South would win the Civil War. They end up shooting off a warning flare, which of course goes exactly as we expect it to. This death is just kind of okay, but what really makes this funny is that later in the episode, Cartman writes a letter to Kenny's mother, informing her of his death during battle, and it is very funny.
This war has taken something from all of us, and although your son appears to be the only casualty so far, know that we all share your pain.
So at the 85th and 84th spots, we have Kenny's deaths from Make Love Not Warcraft. Now both of these end up being pretty much the same, as Kenny is killed twice in World of Warcraft in pretty much the same way, so I don't really have much to say about this one. Technically they're not even real life deaths, but who cares. 83 comes from the episode Gnomes, in which the boys are arguing with the Underpants Gnomes about the logistics of owning a business. Don't ask. And while they are doing so, Kenny is crushed by a falling minecart. Now this is a pretty typical Kenny crush death, but this one is funny because of the underpants gnomes reacting like a normal person would react, and the boys just don't care at all.
Oh my god, they killed Kenny. You bastards. Listen, we have to give a huge speech tomorrow about corporate takeovers. Holy shit, we killed your friend. Yeah. Look, we gotta know about corporate takeovers tomorrow or we're screwed. Christ, we squished him like a bug.
So at number 82 is the first of 3 deaths from the episode Pink Eye from season 1. And after this research, I'm pretty sure that means that Pink Eye is tied for the most deaths in a single episode with 3, which I guess isn't important, but I just thought it was interesting. But this is his first death from the episode, where the boys are just chilling at a bus stop, and all of a sudden he is crushed by a falling satellite. This is one where it's just super random and kind of funny because of that, but it also sets up the plot for the entire rest of the episode, as then he would be revived as a zombie later on. Number 81 comes from Chicken Lover, in which Kenny dies from a tree falling over and crushing him. Now again, this death itself is just another typical crush death, but what makes this one funny is the entire episode they keep teasing his death with like a bunch of different near-death experiences, and Stan keeps almost saying the line and getting cut off, and then as they finally play the happy ending like credits, this is what happens. Number 80 is in the episode Summer Sucks, and technically again he dies twice in this episode, but the other one is a flashback and we'll get to it later. The town ends up building the world's largest snake. Not the animal, but like, you know those little fireworks that you like light them on fire and they grow? Don't ask. Anyways, they severely underestimate the size of this giant snake, and Kenny takes cover under the bleachers and ends up getting crushed to death when they collapse. Just another typical like crushing of Kenny, but it is still funny in the way that it catches you off guard. Number 79 comes from Mr. Hankey's Christmas Classics, and the whole episode is basically just a bunch of South Park Christmas songs. And at the end of the episode, when they're seemingly having a somewhat touching moment, Kenny is crushed by a falling chandelier. Now this one's actually funny in a very dark way, because this song at the end of the episode was a tribute to Mary Kay Bergman, who voiced all the female characters in the show and the movie for the first 3 seasons, but she had tragically taken her own life like a month before this episode was released. So it is funny in a very dark way that even with this being a touching tribute to her, they just still couldn't help but kill Kenny. Number 78 is in Helen Keller the Musical, when Cartman hates the turkey that Timmy picked out for the school play, so he tries to kill it with a falling light, but of course, it doesn't go to plan.
And right about now. There we go, good.
I really like this one because there's like 15 seconds of Cartman making sure that the turkey is in the exact right spot to get crushed, and then when the light actually falls, it's nowhere near it. There was also a running gag throughout the episode that Stan couldn't speak correctly because of his fake beard, so his line afterwards is pretty funny.
Oh my god, they killed Kenny!
Number 77 comes from Do the Handicapped Go to Hell? All the boys are running to church to confess their sins, and in like a final destination scene, Kenny is run over by a bus going way too fast. It's incredibly sudden, and it also scares the rest of the boys even more since they think that Kenny went to hell since he didn't confess. And technically it's revealed that he's alive in Mexico in the next episode, like the bus took him all the way to Mexico. So it's not confirmed that he died, but realistically he probably did die and just revived since the next episode came out. Number 76 comes from Timmy 2000, when Cartman is hallucinating a bunch of pink Christina Aguilera monsters as a side effect of Ritalin, and this of course leads to him accidentally murdering Kenny. I don't know why the pink Christina Aguilera monsters has always been really funny to me for some reason, and also the way the boys react to this in their like zombie Ritalin mode is pretty good.
Oh my goodness, you killed Kenny. Bastard.
Number 75 is the second death from City on the Edge of Forever. This one technically happens in a false memory, as that's kind of the bit throughout the entire episode where they have all these false memories. But the death is unremarkable, but it leads to them arguing about the fact that Kenny just died earlier, so that doesn't make any sense. And this just sort of was an early confirmation of the lore that they know nothing about Kenny dying over and over again. For number 74, we go back to season 1's Pink Eye. After the zombie version of Kenny is killed once and for all, as they do the classic horror movie reveal of him rising from his grave, only for him to get crushed by a statue. And then a plane crashes into him for good measure. This one's just really funny, and it's also arguably Kenny's most iconic look. Pretty much anytime there's merch of Kenny dying, they use this version of him for it. For example, when Adidas did their collab with South Park, I picked up the pair of NMDs that are clearly modeled after Kenny in this scene. Number 73 comes when the boys are performing as Finger Bang, and Kenny just happens to be standing in the wrong spot and is slowly crushed by the elevator. The whole thing throughout this episode is that they need 5 members to have a proper boy band, so now because Kenny just died, they need a replacement, and because of that, it sets up to complete Randy's character arc after his previous experience of being in a boy band, and he's able to redeem himself. It's really important to the plot, and it works well. Number 72 is in the episode The Succubus. Now, technically in this episode, Kenny dies twice, but I forgot to include the first one on the list, so I'm just going to mention it here. There's like a time-lapse shot of the boys waiting for Chef at the bus stop, and at one point it just shows Kenny randomly dead on the ground before reviving immediately after. But the main one comes when it's revealed that Chef's new girl is actually an evil succubus, and she crushes him to death in in the church. Again, the death itself is pretty average Crush death, but it ends up being pretty important to the plot as Cartman spends most of the episode dealing with his horrible eyesight, only for him to bring Kenny's severed head to the optometrist and use his eyes for a transplant. Now, aside from the fact that this would of course unlock Cartman's Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan and make him more powerful than ever before, this little scene that Matt and Trey definitely forgot about immediately after writing it would not be forgotten by the fandom, who would craft theories about this being the reason Cartman knows that Kenny dies. Because in the episode Cartmanland, he makes a reference to the fact that he knows about Kenny dying. This episode is also the reason why, if you've ever looked at South Park fan art, they often depict Cartman as having heterochromia, since canonically Kenny has blue eyes and Cartman has brown eyes. Number 71 comes from season 5 when the boys end up in Afghanistan and they meet their doppelgangers. This of course leads to both versions of Kenny being killed by the American military, and then Stan and Kyle's counterparts do their lines for them in Dari Persian. The death itself is pretty unremarkable, but like I said earlier, I do find it funny that Kenny's aura just seems to have this effect on people where they all have to react the exact same way. Number 70 comes from Jubilee, in which Kenny is sent to the Jew Scouts with Kyle. Now realistically, this one should be much lower in the D tier because Kenny just hits his head on a conch shell and dies. Like, I really don't even think that would even kill him. But the only reason it's this high up is because of the context. This is one of the earliest examples of Kenny's selflessness, as he intentionally sacrifices himself in order to free Moses and save the Jews. And this was after they had basically been shunning him for the entire episode since he wasn't a Jew. But as we'll see quite a bit later in this list, Kenny has a very strong moral compass and is willing to suffer if it means protecting those around him, even those who wrong him. So because of that, I thought that this death deserved to be higher than D tier. We have finally made it to number 69. That is the funniest number ever. Surely no funnier numbers exist. This one comes in the second episode of the Coon and Friends trilogy, in which Kenny's superhero identity Mysterion is finally revealed. Now again, the death itself isn't that special, but what is special is that this is the first time we see what happens to Kenny when he dies from his perspective. He's stabbed by the cult of Cthulhu and wakes up in bed completely fine the next day. And we'll talk about this trilogy a lot more later since Kenny dies 4 times in it, and it's also the first time they decided to explain why Kenny dies all the time, and because of that, it's one of the most important parts of his character. So as we get to each death, I'll talk about it a little more. Number 68 comes from the episode The Entity, and this death is again nothing very special, it's just pretty funny. While they're trying to get on a plane, a TSA agent finds a pair of toenail clippers on Kenny and calls him a terrorist and just shoots him in the head. Again, nothing special, I just thought this one was pretty funny. Number 67. Speaking of Kenny lore, this was their first attempt at explaining Kenny's deaths in season 4. Throughout the episode, Kenny finds out that his mom is trying to get pregnant and does whatever he can to prevent it. In the end, he ends up getting crushed by an ambulance, and shortly after, his mother gives birth, giving us this scene.
Well, seeing as though Kenny passed away, maybe we should name him, Kenny.
Yes.
God, this must be the 50th time this has happened.
52nd.
So yeah, as it turns out, Kenny's mother gives birth to him every single time he dies again, and I guess he just grows overnight. Number 66 comes in A Very Crappy Christmas, and I'm just now realizing how many meta deaths we have back to back here. This wasn't intentional, but it is appropriate. So in this episode, the boys decide to create their own little Christmas movie made with construction paper and stop motion, which of course is a reference to The Spirit of Christmas, which Matt and Trey made doing the exact same thing. But as they begin prepping to get it all set up, Kenny gets run over, which leads to this decision.
It's okay, we'll just have his character die in the film.
Again, the death itself isn't that special, but this is another example of one that's pretty meta, and I very much enjoy it. Number 65 comes from the episode Bike Parade, and this is one of the exceedingly rare Kenny deaths in the later seasons. In this case, Jeff Bezos comes into town with Amazon and kind of flexes his power on everyone.
Alexa, kill Kenny.
Okay, I'll kill Kenny for you.
Initially, this just seems like a throwaway joke, but later in the episode, it's revealed that Kenny was actually killed by this. So technically, this is an off-screen death, but Jeff Bezos asking Alexa to kill Kenny is funny enough to make it this high. So to start off the B tier at number 64 comes from Sexual Healing, and it can only be so far up because it's an off-screen death, but this one is incredibly funny because they were basically setting up for it the entire episode. Throughout the entire episode, all Kenny wants is a BJ from his new girlfriend, and Cartman the entire time keeps warning him of the dangers of the female mouth and how it's the filthiest place on earth.
You're gonna let a girl put her mouth on your wiener? Do you know how disgusting that is? Girls' mouths are full of germs.
But in the end, Kenny gets exactly what he wants, and it doesn't turn out too well for him.
Let us all be reminded that syphilis is still a deadly disease.
I told him. Woman's mouth is the most germ-ridden place on earth, I said.
At number 63 is the other death from the episode that I mentioned earlier where Kenny was on the feeding tube, but this is the death that kills him in the first place and sends him to heaven to help fight against the armies of hell. While being distracted by his addiction to his PSP, he is run over by a car. Again, a pretty typical Kenny death, but the fact that it sets up for the entire rest of the episode makes it pretty great. Number 62 comes from the episode Towley, in which they end up accidentally destroying the secret laboratory and there's just a giant pit of lava at the bottom of it for no reason, and of course Kenny falls into it. Again, the death itself isn't that funny, but the fact that there's just a giant pit of lava there for no reason makes it funny enough to get this high. Number 61 comes from Quintuplets 2000, where Kenny ends up being killed by the US government while they're attempting to extract him and return him to America. Pretty typical shooting death, but what makes it particularly funny is that this is a direct recreation of an image from the raid on Elian Gonzalez, which is like a real life story of its own that I'm not going to get into too much here, but it is pretty funny that they referenced it here. Number 60 is one of the most recent Kenny deaths coming from the Pandemic special, and in this case it just ends up being a case of police brutality as he's murdered by South Park's police force. It's a pretty gory kill, and the fact that the police are just incredibly overkill with their firepower makes it a lot funnier. Number 59 comes from Sexual Healing, in which Kenny, Butters, and Kyle are informed that they're all sex addicts, and they end up learning about what autoerotic asphyxiation is, and of course, Kenny gives it a try.
You choke yourself with a belt around your neck while masturbating dressed up like Batman or something, then you pass out from lack of air, and apparently it makes your orgasm super awesome.
Kenny?
Technically an off-screen death, but we see the aftermath, and just the fact that he actually dressed up like Batman makes this one very funny to me. Number 58 comes from Merry Christmas, Charlie Manson, in which the ATF is descending on Cartman's family's house. And this is just another example of Kenny being killed because of police/government incompetence, and it is very funny.
Look out, he's got a white flag!
Number 57 comes from Cartman's mom is a dirty slut back in season 1, and in this case he survives getting dragged around by an out-of-control go-kart, only to be completely obliterated by a train. It's just another all-time classic, and it's actually pretty important to the plot because they were trying to win America's Stupidest Home Videos, because they were going to help Cartman pay for the genetic testing to find out who his father is. But as it turns out, someone recorded Kenny dying here and submitted it, and that ended up winning, and they couldn't get the grand prize because of that. Number 56 is another absolute classic. It comes from Tom's Rhinoplasty. The substitute teacher is being kidnapped by a bunch of Iraqi nationals, and while that's happening, she accidentally ends up throwing a sword at Kenny and impaling him into the wall. I feel like a lot of the early season 1 and 2 deaths were very simple, but at the same time very brutal, and this is a perfect example of that. Number 55 comes from Hooked on Monkey Phonics, in which Phonics Monkey just goes crazy and absolutely brutalizes Kenny. Now, I always assumed that this was sort of supposed to be a reference to the whole Travis the Chimp incident in real life, but that actually didn't even happen until like 2009, and this episode came out way before that. So unfortunately, it seems like a bit of South Park predicting the future again, but my favorite part of this kill ends up being Cartman's reaction to it.
Oh my god! Phonics Monkey killed Kenny! You're damn straight he did.
Not it. You lose, Kenny. Ugh. Oh my god! They killed Kenny! You!
Number 53 comes from Summer Sucks. This is the episode I mentioned earlier where he gets crushed by the giant snake, but like not the actual snake, it's the firework thing. You get it. But this one is funny because it's like a flashback to when they were little babies, and in this case he gets exploded by a firecracker. I think what makes it so funny is just how simple the animation is and how his little body parts all fly off. And of course the lines from Baby Stan and Kyle are very funny as well.
Oh, I got scared, Kenny! Oh, bastards!
Number 52 comes from Big Gay Al's Big Gay Boat Ride, and it's actually very similar to the previous one, but in this case, Kenny is playing in the big football game, and he's literally torn limb from limb by the opposing team. Again, just the super early, like, crude animation of this makes it so much funnier, the way his limbs just get torn apart. It's so good. 51 comes from Starvin' Marvin, and again, this is a very early season 1 kill, and once again, it's just very simple but effective as he gets his eye plucked out by a bunch of turkeys who invaded the town. Very gross, but very good. Number 50 comes from Spontaneous Combustion, in which, very appropriately, Kenny spontaneously combusts very early into the episode. I think what makes this one so good is how sudden it is, like it literally comes in the middle of a sentence, and the way that they all just pause to silently address what just happened is so funny.
Did you spend way too much time with that girl?
It also kind of sets up the plot for the rest of the episode as a bunch of people in town start spontaneously combusting and they have to figure out why. Number 49 comes from Conjoined Fetus Lady, in which the boys are playing for the World Championships of Dodgeball, and they're playing against the Chinese dodgeball team. And the Chinese dodgeball team does not fuck around, and they absolutely obliterate Kenny. I mean, surely that's a foul or something. I think that's going to be 2 free throws for SGA. Number 48 comes from the Mexican staring frog of southern Sri Lanka, in which he is ripped in half by an angry mob on Jesus and Friends. Now, you may be beginning to notice a pattern, and that's that a lot of the deaths that are kind of underwhelming, I really appreciate because of how dumb the animation is, and in this case, that is the reason why I like this death. There's just something about the old animation and how like rudimentary it was that I just cannot help but laugh every time something like this happens. Number 47 is in Terrence and Phillip in Behind the Blow, and this is probably one of the most brutal Kenny deaths, because basically what happens is he just slowly gets all of his limbs chopped off one at a time by environmentalists. And even though technically we don't see that he dies or don't have it confirmed by any dialogue, it's pretty obvious that he does die here. And this has got to be like one of the most slow and painful deaths Kenny has suffered out of any of them. It's just brutal. Number 46 is one of the most recent Kenny deaths, coming from the Pandaverse special. And this death is pretty basic. It's just a typical Kenny crush death, but the only reason it's really up this high is because I just love Kenny's like gender swap design. And it also ends up being pretty funny because of the twist they put on Kenny and Stan's lines.
Oh, yo, bitch, you killed Kenny. You fat hoe.
Number 45 comes from season 2, in which Kenny is trampled by a crowd coming out of a movie theater. I love this one in particular because I don't know why the way he's just like casually yo-yoing out in front of this theater is very funny to me. And also the lines that these guys say have always been one of my favorite variations on the Kenny lines.
Oh my god, I found a penny! You bastard!
Number 44 comes from Cripple Fight, and these are the kind of deaths where you start to see why Matt and Trey got tired of this gag, because they kind of just throw it in there randomly. And sometimes that actually made it funnier, like in this example. I do think it's better because of just how random it is that he gets swooped up by a giant bird. And I also really enjoy how Gloria Aldred just doesn't even miss a beat in her speech.
And we owe it all to me and these 6 brave little boys. 5 brave little boys.
Number 43 comes from Cartman's Silly Hate Crime, in which the boys are trying to find a replacement for Cartman on their sledding squad. So they start to experiment with replacing him by putting a giant pile of bricks on the back of their sled. And while they're sledding down Phil Collins Hill, it does not end very well for Kenny. And I also really like how nonchalant the boys' reaction to this one is.
Oh my god, we killed Kenny.
We killed Kenny?
We killed Kenny, we're bastards.
Number 42 comes from the Jeffersons, and honestly, this is one of Kenny's most underrated deaths, because I remember watching this episode for the first time and being like, who even is this random character that they're getting to like sneak into Michael Jackson's house?
All right, but you guys owe me for this.
Dude, whatever, at least you finally get to do something.
And then when Michael Jackson throws him into the roof and kills him and the boys say the thing, I was like, oh, that makes a lot more sense. This one's just really special because of how rare it is to see Kenny without his hood. And this is also one of like the 3 times in the entire show where we hear his normal voice without any kind of muffling or distortion or anything. So I really like this one because of it. Number 41 comes from Scott Tenorman Must Die. And this is another one where he just kind of drops dead, so it's not super creative, but I do love the idea that he died from laughing so hard at Scott Tenorman bullying Cartman. I just also love how his spirit is still laughing as it leaves his body. It's so good. Number 40 comes from the Black Friday trilogy, in which Kenny becomes an anime princess for some reason. I think this death works because of the way he just splats out of the window so suddenly during his like kawaii adventure. It's just so ridiculous. And of course, the lines being spoken in Japanese are a nice touch.
Princess Kini koroshita! Honto! Princess Kini shindeita!
Number 39 comes from It's Christmas in Canada, in which Saddam Hussein has been posing as the Prime Minister of Canada. Don't ask. And after he starts to get pissed off, he just completely obliterates Kenny. This one has some really solid animation and gore, and I think it's just done really well.
Oh my god! They killed Kenny! You bastards!
Now moving into the A tier at number 38, we return to the Coon and Friends trilogy, and this is when Kenny snaps and finally explains his curse to his friends for the very first time. He explains to them how he can't die, and none of them ever remember any of it, and they don't believe him, so he decides to prove a point.
I can't die. No, Stan, I'm being serious. I really, really can't die.
When was that?
All the time. I die all the time, and you assholes never remember.
I think we would remember you dying, dude.
Well, you don't. I die over and over, only to wake up in my bed like nothing happened. I knew there'd be no point in telling you guys. Pretty cool? Do you know what it feels like to be stabbed? To be shot? Decapitated? Torn apart? Burned? Run over?
Kenny, calm down.
It's not pretty cool, Kyle. It f***ing hurts. And it won't go away, and nobody will believe me. Remember this time. Try and f***ing remember.
This is one of my favorite scenes for Kenny's character because it's just really interesting to hear from him for the first time about what a miserable existence it is to be killed in brutal ways over and over again. I just really love this scene and it works really well. And when we get to the final death in this trilogy, I'll explain the lore behind Kenny's deaths and why this all happens in the first place. Number 37 comes from WTF, and while he's dressed as his wrestler alter ego El Pollo Loco, he is launched into the sky on a rocket and exploded. This one's just funny, especially with his Mexican fan base filling in the lines for Stan and Kyle. It's just really great.
Oh, Dios mío! Mataron a pollo loco! Bastardos!
Number 36 comes from the biggest douche in the universe, and this one's actually a recreation of one of Kenny's earliest deaths, which will be much higher on this list, but this time it's Rob Schneider as Kenny, because Rob Schneider ate a pot roast that contained Kenny's soul since it had been trapped in Cartman's body after he drank Kenny's ashes, believing them to be chocolate milk mix, and they traveled to Scotland to get Chef's parents to exorcise him from his body, where he then accidentally ended up in said pot roast. Don't ask. Like I said, it's just a recreation of one of his earlier deaths, but it is very funny to have him replaced with Rob Schneider. Also, this is completely unrelated, but it's something I've been thinking about for a while now. Is the only reason that Chef's parents live in Scotland so that they could set up for that Loch Ness Monster bit? Because I can't think of a single other reason for them to live there, so I'm pretty sure that's the only reason, and honestly, that's pretty hilarious. Number 35 comes from the End of Obesity special, making it the most recent Kenny death. While being chased by a bunch of cereal mascots, Kenny is thrown out of a truck by Tony the Tiger and splats on a windshield behind them. Don't ask. The death itself is pretty unremarkable, but I think the reason I like this one so much is a combination of the fact that we haven't seen normal Kenny die on screen in a few years at this point, and plus the sheer absurdity of the situation they're in is just so ridiculous that I can't help but laugh. Number 34 comes from It Hits the Fan, in which Kenny is infected with the plague early in the episode, but he ends up surviving the entire rest of the episode until, of course, Stan points it out. It's a very sudden and random death, but for some reason this one's like hyper detailed on the gore, and I've always appreciated it for that. Number 33 comes from Cherokee hair tampons, and honestly this is one of the funniest Kenny deaths in my opinion, because Stan is so upset about Kyle's potential death, and Kenny is super pissed off about this because no one ever cares when he dies, and after listening to Stan whine about it, he gets completely fed up and decides to walk away.
Look out! Oops.
There's so many reasons I love this one. The fact that Stan, of course, still doesn't react at all to Kenny's death. The way that the guy who's hoisting the piano holds his arms up and the way he so casually says, "Watch out." It's just so funny. Number 32 comes from season 3, and this one's a bit of a hidden death because it comes mid-credits. There's like a running gag throughout this episode that Kenny has this crazy mech suit to win the costume contest, and yet no one seems to react appropriately to how cool it is, and he still loses to a Chewbacca costume. Then as he walks away dejectedly at the very end, he is killed by a bunch of tiny little Star Wars ships. This one's just incredibly stupid, but it is very funny because of it. Number 31 comes from Tweak X Craig, and the entire episode Kenny spends trying to avoid going to shop class because he knows that there is no possible way he survives being in there, but eventually he's forced to go, and of course as soon as he walks in, this happens. The death itself is pretty creative and funny, but what makes this one so funny is how Mr. Adler then sees the face of his dead lover in Kenny, and we get an absolutely classic line out of Stan.
Thank you, baby. Thank you.
Dude, this is pretty fucked up right here.
Number 30 comes from the episode How to Eat with Your Butt, and this one isn't anything super special. It's just a classic throw it in at the end bit of him getting run over by a motorcycle, but I do like this one in particular because it's just super brutal, and I also think it's the only time he's been run over by a motorcycle, so there's some creativity to it as well. Number 29 comes from Rainforest Schmainforest, in which he finds love in Costa Rica with this girl from their group, but of course Kenny can only have a nice thing for so long. These kind of divine intervention deaths are pretty common for Kenny, but this one's notable because it's actually the first time they look into why Stan and Kyle say their favorite lines.
Oh my god, they killed Kenny! You bastards!
What? Who? Who killed him?
They did.
Who's they?
You know, they. They're bastards.
And if you had never seen this episode, you've probably wondered the same thing. Why do they always say they killed Kenny? Who is they? Well, it's actually a pretty simple and slightly underwhelming answer. They are Matt and Trey. So whenever they say, oh my god, they killed Kenny, they're saying Matt and Trey killed Kenny. It's a little meta joke that the characters don't even realize is meta. Number 28 comes from very early on in the episode. He has a seizure watching a Chinpokomon episode, but he's still kind of there the entire time, before at the very end, this happens.
I'm choosing my own toys from now on because... What the? Gross!
I like this death because it's just really gross and disturbing, and it's actually a reference to a real-life case in which a bunch of kids had seizures after watching an episode of Pokemon. And what's really interesting about this that I've never seen anyone else mention is the fact that this could be another hint at the fact that Cartman knows Kenny dies, because he says this right before it happens.
No, get off, you stupid rats. He's not dead yet.
Now, how would Cartman know that the rats are a trademark thing of Kenny dying if he had never died before? Is it just a coincidence, or does he know something more than he's letting on? Also, another slightly unrelated critique. In the rare case that Kenny does die in any season past like season 5, they never use the little crappily animated rats anymore. I miss them so much, they were so funny. Bring back the PNG rats. Number 27 comes from Cow Days, in which Cartman, thinking that he is a Vietnamese prostitute, is riding a bull trying to win a grand prize. Don't ask. And the boys tell Kenny to go in there and help him, and Kenny starts to do it, but then reconsiders. This one's just pretty creative. I've always enjoyed it, and it's always funny whenever Kenny has that sort of meta moment of realization that, wait, I'm the one that dies all the time. Why would I be putting myself into this situation? Number 26 comes from Spooky Fish, in which Stan has an evil fish from another dimension. Don't ask, but this evil fish decides that Kenny's gonna be his next victim and absolutely tears him apart. This one's just very absurd and brutal, and I've always enjoyed it because of that. Number 25 is the second death from an episode I mentioned earlier, the one where Kenny's trying to prevent his mom from being pregnant. But this death actually comes in a dream sequence of his in which he is brutally murdered by his newborn brother, who's like some weird alien creature. I couldn't decide at first if I wanted to include this because it's a dream and it didn't technically happen, but at this point it's clear that Matt and Trey don't care about any form of continuity, so I don't really care either. I'm just gonna include it. Number 24 comes from An Elephant Makes Love to a Pig, and this is another very early classic Kenny death. This time he is just tossed into the microwave and burnt to a crisp. It's creative, simple, and incredibly brutal, and I like it because of that. And speaking of classics, number 23 comes from The Pilot. This is the OG Kenny death. You know, considering that this is the very first Kenny death, I didn't expect it to kind of already be challenging the formula a little bit, because he gets zapped by the alien spaceship and Stan and Kyle say their lines, but then they realize that he's still alive, only to be trampled by a herd of cows immediately after. I don't know if it's some weird Mandela effect or something, but I always remembered it being more simple, just him dying from the zap. But no, the fact that they did a fake out for the very first one is just crazy to me. Number 22 comes from the Tooth Fairy's Tats 2000. Love the alliteration. But in this case, this is another very funny Kenny death. The boys end up getting on the bad side of the tooth trade mob, and they decide to put concrete on his feet and throw him off a bridge. But they don't take into account the fact that the water is only like 6 inches deep, so it's not very successful. And throughout the episode, you can actually see Kenny a couple times in the background, just kind of standing there stuck in the river. And then at the very end, as the credits roll, he tries to hop his way out, only for this to happen. Number 21 is in Jackofosaurs, in which Kenny dresses as a deer to try to distract Cartman out in the wilderness, but instead he accidentally attracts a bear who dolphin dives down the side of the mountain and just grabs him. I mean, this is just another case of the early, like, crappy animation making it so much funnier than it should be. I don't know why the way the bear just dives at him has always been so funny to me. Number 20 comes from Cartman's mom is still a dirty slut, and this is another early example of Kenny's altruism, because the power goes out in a blizzard, and Kenny decides to basically sacrifice himself in order to save everyone and find out who Cartman's father really is. It's just a great display of his character, because Cartman also notoriously talks about how much he hates Kenny all the time, so the fact that Kenny was willing to sacrifice himself just to help Cartman with this really goes to show just how good of a guy he actually is. Number 19 comes from Sexual Harassment Panda, and honestly, I don't even have anything to say about this one. This one's just so dumb, and I have to show you it because it makes me laugh every time.
Hey, kids! I'm Jimmy, the don't hold on to a large magnet while someone else uses a fan nearby Falcon. See?
Number 18 is in Cartman Land, and again, this is a very simple but very effective death as he gets impaled in the face on a roller coaster at Cartman Land. This scene also sets up for the reveal that Cartman may know that Kenny dies because Kenny's parents sue Cartman Land.
Hey, that's my money!
There's also the lawsuit of the little boy who died in your park. The family's entitled to the rest of this.
What, Kenny? He dies all the time!
Again, very simple, very effective, very well done. Number 17 comes from 4th grade, and his death itself is pretty gory and well done, but what really makes this one special is that this is probably the funniest post-death reaction from the boys that we've ever seen.
Well, who didn't see that coming?
Number 16 comes from the episode Fat Camp, and I included this one thinking the whole time that this was just completely forgotten about by everyone. I was always like, why does no one include this death on the wiki? Like, this one is crazy. But then I remembered that this actually isn't even Kenny. This is just some random kid that they got to wear his suit after Kenny was arrested for prostitution. So realistically, I should not include this one, but I already made it this far and I don't want to mess up like the numbers on the list. Plus, who really cares, honestly? Especially since this is probably the most disgusting would-be Kenny death in the entire series. Because he was trying to do a challenge where he spent 6 hours inside of Mrs. Crabtree, and at the end, she pushes him out in the most horrific fashion ever. This one is just absolutely repulsive, and it kind of sucks that it's not actually Kenny because it definitely deserves to be ranked very high. Number 15 comes once again from the Coon and Friends trilogy, and this one comes at the very end of the trilogy after Kenny's feeling incredibly defeated because he thought that he was supposed to be the chosen one to save the world, but it turned out to be Mint Berry Crunch the whole time. So he just decides to get some much needed rest.
I'm tired, guys. Think I'm gonna go to bed.
Number 14 comes from season 2 when the boys are at the planetarium, and it turns out the planetarium has been using some kind of mind control device on all of the people visiting, and the boys decide to crank it up to its highest setting when Kenny is testing it. This one's not particularly funny or anything, it's just very creative and gory, and I've always really liked it. Number 13 comes from the episode Poor Kids, and I think this might be my favorite version of the sudden divine intervention deaths that Kenny gets all the time, because in this case, Cartman is thankful that Kenny's back in school since that would make him not the poorest kid in school anymore, but as he's busy celebrating, this happens.
What the
I think what makes this one so funny to me is the fact that this giant bird dinosaur thing is like 3D animated and hyper detailed, and it doesn't even look like it belongs in the show at all. It feels almost like a Smiling Friends bit or something. Like, it just is so random that it is hilarious. And the fact that it completely ruins Cartman's mood only makes it even funnier.
My mama's so poor she walks down the road with one shoe. And if you ask her if she lost her shoe, she says, no, I found one.
We have finally reached the S tier, and starting at number 12 is the final death from the Coon and Friends trilogy. And this comes when they are all trapped in an alternate Cthulhu dimension, and Kenny realizes that the only way to save his friends and to stop Cartman and Cthulhu's rampage is to do what he does best.
Ow! That fucking hurts! Ugh.
And at this point, he has learned the truth about his curse and what's causing it as he talked to his parents earlier in the episode, and finds out that his parents used to be involved in a cult that worshipped Cthulhu simply because they offered free beer at their meetings. And because of that, Kenny is eternally trapped with this curse. So yeah, the official canon explanation for why Kenny dies and is revived so often is because his parents wanted free beer. Number 11 comes from The List, and normally when they kill off Kenny with an insane, unlucky circumstance, it's done for one of two reasons. Either they need it to happen for the plot, or earlier in the show, they felt like they needed to kill him off every episode because of the running gag. But in this case, it was kind of the opposite. This one was done entirely for comedic effect, as he was barely even involved in the episode at all up to this point. And as the climax of the plot is happening with Wendy and Bebe up on the rooftop of the school, somehow Kenny manages to get roped into it.
Wendy!
This one's just hilarious. Number 10 comes from Chef Aid, and I think this might be an unpopular opinion, but I've always really loved this death, mainly because it's just a funny reference to a real-life event that happened with Ozzy Osbourne, and the fact that they got him to voice himself for the scene makes it that much better. And I don't know, maybe you guys will disagree with me on this, but I've just always found this one very funny, and I thought it deserved to be up here. Number 9 comes from Prehistoric Iceman. This is another one that I think is kind of an unpopular pick, but I think for me in particular, this one just captured some deep-seated irrational fear I have of like conveyor belts and escalators and that kind of stuff, as Kenny ends up getting sucked into one and absolutely shredded to pieces. This one is just one of the most horrific deaths to me. It's always made me very uncomfortable. It's like some Final Destination shit, and because of that, I have to rank it high. Number 8 comes from Proper Condom Use, and I'm beginning to realize that I think a lot of my top picks are going to be pretty unpopular, because again, there's nothing super hilarious about this or anything super important to the plot. This one has always just been very creative to me, and I've always liked the Mad Max kind of aesthetic of it, and for a bit of an earlier episode, it's also a pretty brutal and detailed kill, and I've always appreciated appreciated it because of that. And I mean, getting your face caved in by a boomerang, that's just really cool. I don't know what to say. Number 7 comes from Chef Goes Nanners, and while the boys are having a meeting with Gerald, Kenny ends up eating a bunch of breath mints that Gerald has sitting out on the table. Unfortunately for him, it is quickly revealed that those are not breath mints.
Oh, those weren't mints. Those were antacid tablets.
Oh. Kenny!
What?
That was a good one.
This one kind of has everything you want from a Kenny kill. It's funny, it's creative, it's very gruesome, and the way the boys react makes it even funnier. For me, this one is definitely an all-timer. At number 6, we have an absolute classic, maybe the most iconic Kenny death ever. It is the flagpole impalement from season 1, episode 2. I feel like when you think of Kenny dying, this is the death that you think of. Again, incredibly simple and yet very creative. Like I said, for me personally, this is the first death I think of whenever I think of Kenny dying. It's just that iconic, and because of that, I have to give it some praise. At number 5, we have another absolute classic Kenny death. This one comes from season 1's Mecha Streisand, and I'm just going to go ahead and show you this one first. Not only is this one pretty creative in the actual kill itself, but what really makes this one so funny is all the chaos going on around them, with there being seemingly endless opportunities for Kenny to die everywhere at this point, only for him to, for absolutely no reason, just walk up to the tetherball pole and hit the ball just for it to choke him out. Like, there was literally zero reason for him to do that at all. It was completely unrelated to anything else going on, and of course, that's what ends up killing him. It's just so stupid, and because of that, I love it so much. Number 4, this might be a hot take, comes from I should have never gone ziplining. In my opinion, this might be the most underrated Kenny death. In terms of the death itself, it's essentially an off-screen death, so that should go to show just how funny I think this death is. With the context of the rest of the episode and how this is essentially like a documentary parody about how they survived a near-death experience of being bored while ziplining, that alone makes it pretty hilarious, but the real cherry on top is the fact that it's completely done in live action for no reason, and all of the boys are so overly dramatic about everything. It makes it so hilarious.
Kenny McCormick has died of boredom.
Oh my God, they killed Kenny. You bastards!
No, not they, you! Look what your ziplining idea has done! You killed Kenny, you're the bastard!
It wasn't my idea, it was yours! You killed Kenny, you bastard!
And of course, the narrator dramatically saying that Kenny has died of boredom. I mean, all of this together, I think this is the funniest Kenny death in the whole show. Number 3 comes from the episode Kenny Dies. Now, this is by far the most important Kenny death in the entire series. And what makes this death so great and comedic is the fact that it's treated with such gravity the entire episode. Because up to this point, the boys have essentially never reacted seriously to Kenny dying. So the fact that they hear that Kenny's gonna die and they all treat it with the seriousness that it actually deserves makes this so funny. But at the same time, it's legitimately sad and emotional. It's done incredibly well as the rest of the boys struggle with the grief of losing their friend. And at the end of the episode, there's no comedic twist. They don't kill him off in any kind of funny way. He dies in his bed off screen alone while Stan is coming to visit him.
I didn't get to see him. God, I didn't get to say goodbye. Did he say anything before he went? He just said, "Where's Stan?"
And as I mentioned, this was supposed to be the end of Kenny's character. This was supposed to kill him off for good. And because of that, the entirety of season 6 has no Kenny in it besides him possessing Cartman's body later in the season. And then of course, in the very last episode of season 6, he just reappears with no explanation.
Well, all in all, I have to say this was a pretty special Christmas.
Hey guys, what's going on?
Oh, hey, Kenny.
Dude, where have you been?
But yeah, this death is incredible. It's easily one of the best episodes of the entire show, and it deserves to be this high because of that. So at the runner-up spot, we go to the movie, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. Now, Kenny actually dies twice in this movie, and in all honesty, I just forgot to make them two separate things, but both are equally good, so we're going to talk about both of them right now. The first is what really starts to put the plot of the movie into motion. He goes up in flames after trying to light his fart on fire, and while Cartman tries to put him out by hitting him with a stick repeatedly, they decide to rub some salt in the wound. But that's not it, because Kenny is still alive, and we get an entire scene of the operating room being just sheer chaos and incompetence, and it's absolutely hilarious.
Try to untangle his trachean esophagus.
Dude!
Oh, that doesn't go there.
Doctor, his heart stopped.
Let's get it out of there. We need to zap this, quick. Who's making a potato?
My bad, sir. I missed lunch.
Damn it, I'm not gonna lose this kid.
Oh.
Great. Son, I have some bad news. We accidentally replaced your heart with a baked potato. You have about 3 seconds to live.
Fucking weak, dude!
And the incompetence of the doctors being what actually kills him in the end is so hilarious, and the way the doctor himself reacts to it makes it just that much better.
Damn it! It never gets any easier!
And then his second death in the movie comes at the very end, when Satan decides to grant him one wish since he had been helping him throughout the entire movie. And his wish is to save the world by making everything back to normal, including sending himself back to hell.
Goodbye, you guys.
This was an absolutely massive moment because this was the first time Kenny's face and real voice had ever been revealed. On top of that, it's kind of the peak moment of his character showing how good of a person he really is and how altruistic he's willing to be. And as if it couldn't get any better, they wrap it up in the absolute perfect way. These two deaths have literally everything you would want from a Kenny death, and they really showcase all the best aspects of his character, and because of that, they easily make it to the top of S tier. And with all of that being said, you're probably wondering what the hell is going to be number 1 then. And yeah, I have a feeling this pick's going to be slightly controversial, and honestly, I'm not quite sure myself why I picked it. And trust me, I did not want this to be number 1. It felt so wrong to have this above all the other ones I just talked about, because I wouldn't say this death is particularly special or relevant to his character or anything like that. But from the very moment I started working on this video like years ago, I knew this was going to be number 1. And again, I don't know why. This is just purely based on my instincts. Something is telling me to put this at number 1, so here it is.
Oh my god! I killed Kenny! You bastard!
And I don't know. Okay? I don't know why I like this one so much. The gore is just pretty average. It's not the most creative death. It's just a parody of zombie movies. It's not particularly funny, and it doesn't really have any effect on his character at all. But there's just something about this death that has just always stuck with me more than any of the other deaths from the entire show, and I don't know why. And if that makes you super upset, I understand. But this is my pick, and I have to go with it. So, there we go. That was every Kenny death ranked